So, I don't need these for this. So a while back, I did a review for the first Highschool DXD book, and college got in the way and stuff. Man, look at that beautiful hairline. And yeah, so whatever. And as sort of time went on, college got in the way, and I wasn't really able to continue that book review. However, or that series. So, currently doing the second book. This follows the rest of season 1 with the Riser, I guess the Riser saga. Technically it's called the Phoenix of the School Battle. So, a brief overview of the book, simple. After the events of the first book, we find out that Rias is forcefully engaged to Riser Phoenix, a noble demon from a noble household. I guess technically I said that incorrectly. He's a high-ranking demon from a noble household. And she doesn't want to get married to him for reasons the book gets into and we'll talk about a little later. And that leads to a rating game, which is talked about in the first book, but this is the first time we actually experience said rating game. And yeah, after that, it just follows the events of the anime if you're familiar with it. Actually does have a picture of Riser at the start. It also has a picture of the Chainsaw twins in Riser's harem, which is a little surprising. And we also have a picture of Issei and Rias during the training arc. It is a little surprising that we do get a picture for Riser, the twins in Riser's group, because I don't think we get a picture for his sister in the book or any of the other characters in his harem. It's just the Chainsaw twins. Which is a little surprising. I would have thought that if we were going, based on what happens in the book, I would have thought that if we were going to get any character as a picture, it would be the woman who beats up Issei early on. But it is what it is. So, I'll talk about the characters as we go along, but for the most part, I don't quite remember how the first one went. I did take a bunch of notes for important sections to discuss, talking about the characters and the like. I will say, as a sequel moving forward, this was a lot more enjoyable of a read than the first book was. A lot more it was faster paced, more on focus, but more importantly than that, Issei as a character is a lot more enjoyable and tolerable in this book. There are a lot more moments to show his noble nature, I guess would be the right word to call it, or at least his heroic nature, we'll call it. I'm not quite sure how to properly call it. Basically, he's just... There's a lot less incel vibes and a lot more I want to be better for my friends vibes in this one, which makes him a much more enjoyable protagonist to sort of be around, because the entire book, with the exception of one section, is spent in his head. And yeah, so a lot less incest vibes, a lot more just I want to be stronger for Rias, stuff of that nature. And yeah, so we're going to go a little more in depth with the notes and then go from there. But Issei being a much more likable character in the second book is definitely a plus. So, the book does start with Issei having a dream about marrying Rias and then running into the Red Dragon Emperor, so to speak, in a dream. That will become a more major character as the book goes on. He does make an appearance near the end, but sort of setting up the... I guess the more important nature of his place among the sacred gears and the cosmology as a whole. But beyond that, nothing too crazy at the beginning of the book. Just Issei wanting to marry Rias and talking to the dragon. I don't believe he says anything. He does specifically state that Issei was too weak to notice him in the first book. But after, I guess, training and getting used to his demonic body, he has become strong enough to perceive the dragon. Issei does end up training throughout the day, specifically because demons are weaker during the day in the series, as we mentioned last time. And he does do a 20-kilometer run daily, 100 dashes, and 100 push-ups. Similar to the workout that I think Saitama does in One Punch Man, actually. Although this came out, I believe, way before One Punch Man did. This is a translation of the book series, but I'm pretty sure the anime predates One Punch Man by a substantial margin, and the book will predate the anime. So, yeah, so we do get some interaction with his friends. I will say, I think I mentioned this in the first book, or in the first book review, but the anime has his friends playing a much bigger role, at least it feels like, in his life, whereas in the book, you're kind of just being told, yeah, Issei has friends, kinda, and then we're never really gonna spend time with them. I think the most they spend is like 3 pages together, and that's it. But that being said, this book is very fast paced. Yeah, basically, his friends are all jealous of Issei because Issei's been hanging out with the girls in the occult research club, Akino, Rias, and stuff like that. And now Ashia is Ashia. I'm gonna mispronounce it every single time. Is now living with him, and she's coming every day, so they obviously get jealous. So Issei decides to, for no reason at all, kind of just screw with them, and he sends them to his client, who is a male individual dressed as a magical girl who talks about basically the magical girl anime and wanting to be a magical girl, which is kind of silly that he does that. It's not quite as mean-spirited or as like, it doesn't really give off negative vibes in this book because Issei's by virtue basically just being around hot women has made Issei into a more chill character, but it's still kind of like there's no real reason to do that. And as far as we could tell, besides his friends making fun of him for the same shit they're all going through, because despite Issei calling out his friends, he does basically claim that if he didn't end up with all these beautiful women, he probably would end up in the situation. Yeah, I believe he says it here, but unfortunately, here we go. Yeah, this line basically sums it up. Jealousy sure could be terrifying. My whole life, it seemed, had undergone a sudden reversal. Everything was now joyful and rosy, all because I had befriended a beautiful young lady. Yeah. So that's basically. He does say here that he was a little upset to see his friend so upset at the fact that he had become so familiar with all the girls. I was certain those days promised to be the most enjoyable time of my life. That being said, though, there was no real reason to like throw them towards a cross dresser like that. They do get back at him a little later on, but it's just kind of silly that Issei does that. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so this one was actually so the next note I have has less to do with the actual book quality itself, more of the lore situation. So in the first book and in this book too, the way demons are summoned, I believe I mentioned this in the first book review, and if you've seen the anime, you already know this, but if you haven't, demons are summoned by them handing out flyers, and people will like wish for something on the flyer, and a demon will come and grant that wish, ideally. However, this book clarifies that the flyers are usually sent to specific people who they have determined through extrasensory perception and a technology that finds people more willing to do it, that I believe it does say technology. Because, so to be clear, a lot of people would not care to have this option or wouldn't really like have anything to give for it. I think this was more so meant to. Well, actually, I lost my train of thought there for a second. So, the flyers basically go after people who are more willing to use them and basically find their way to those people so they're more willing to use it and be tempted by it. So, the flyers do tempt people, but they tempt people specifically who are more likely to use it, but they're able to find it. Yeah, the leaflets probably didn't mean much to those who were already living satisfying lives. They were enchanted with a special charm that tempted those possessed a raging and fulfilled desires into using them. Yeah. So we had a special mobile device that helped us identify the homes of those with unquenchable desires. Follow the little detector, we would arrive at their place and toss one of the flyers into their mailbox. They would move on to the next potential client, rinse, repeat. Yeah, so he basically has a GPS that can tell people are unsatisfied with their lives and will give them a flyer that will basically tempt them to make a deal with the demon. Although I'm pretty sure that is done specifically to make the demon seem less evil or to try and like dissuade the idea of negative connotations with the deal, because it does specify that people who are living fulfilling lives are not really in danger of the deal, or so to speak, or are really tempted by it. On page 28, we just find out that Issei still hates Kaiba or Kiba. I think it's Kiba. I think they pronounce it as Kiba because Kaiba, I believe, has an A. Kiba is just Kiba. Yeah, Yuto Kiba. I'm not gonna be able to. Pronounce that. Yeah. Beyond that, there's just a couple pages of just talking to people. I believe in this case, the president is kind of just. Actually, I guess she's just kind of like lost in her thoughts because she's being forced to be married. Although there is a reference here. Or not a reference, but there is a note that there are people who do ask for obviously sexual favors from the demons, but specifically they have specific demons who handle those contacts, which I'm assuming is more so just to accept the idea that at least the girls of the research club are not going around doing perverted acts. Because there is, despite the book being perverted, I said this in the last book, but there's definitely a sense of like trying to keep some innocence going or trying to make it seem like they're just they're just hot on their own, but they themselves aren't lewd in any way, so to speak. It's a sort of situation like that. It tries to keep quite a bit of innocence to itself. We do get a scene where Issei does end up walking into the bathroom with Ashia. And they're both kind of naked in that scene. Although he does his best to reject the thoughts around. No, actually, no, I take that back. I don't think that's the. No. That scene comes a little later. This is the scene where he's just picturing her showering and stuff, and he's just trying to keep himself in check. Because to Issei's credit, that is what he. And this kind of leads to problems, I believe, later on down the line, but. Despite her being like the first person to fall in love with Issei, unfortunately, he sees her as a little sister and needs to be protected. So a good portion of their interaction in this book is her basically crying and basically effectively running away because Issei's too dense to realize that she actually likes him that way. We do get an interesting line here where Issei tries to recite a Buddhist. It says a Buddhist invocation, and he gets a headache, which is interesting because I'm not sure if this is in the anime. I don't remember if this is in the anime, but in the world of Highschool DXD, there's heaven, hell, and fallen angels as sort of the factions. Demons, angels, fallen angels. But it's basically Judeo-Christian mythology is the main group that's talked about. However, a bunch of other deist gods exist. And a bunch of other deist pantheons exist as well, because later on we do get the Norse pantheon involved, some Wukongs in the series, and a bunch of other characters. So it is kind of weird that technically demons are weak to every form of divinity instead of just the standard angels. On page 33, page 35. So in page 35, we do get an interesting scene. In a way, interesting in the sense that, like, usually the author, I said this in the last book, but despite the book series being as lewd as it is, or the books being as lewd as they are, the author doesn't really spend a lot of time describing the girls, which seemed a little surprising given the fact that there are straight nude images in the book. But, he doesn't do that. He does that on page 35. With Rias, because she's stripping down to try and sleep with Issei. He does refer to himself as a sex-obsessed teenager, and she just starts stripping right in front of him. It is described a little bit more in depth than it was in the first book. I would show you the picture, but it does have nudity in it. It's censored, to be fair, but it's probably too much to show on YouTube. Issei does reference. Let me see here. Oh, yeah, actually, so going back to the innocence point for a minute, Issei basically refers to his junk as the you-know-where spot. Here we go. Her buttocks and thighs were pressing against my you know where. So again, just a little weird that the book. Hey, let me make sure on the camera here. Yeah. Okay. So just to make sure you can't see the page. A little weird at how the innocent situation kind of plays into it. I'm sure there's a. I'm gonna move this over here actually, so that way I can see that. But yeah, no. So he does almost get laid, to be fair, and this is where I kind of was a little surprised by this scene. Not her with Rhea's every movement, her bountiful bust bounced and swayed. Its destructive power was simply too great. This was only my second time seeing bare breasts, and both occurrences had taken place on this very bed. But no, and the first time it was Rhea's as well in the first book. However, this kind of surprised me a little bit because. So after a few minutes of her not sort of teasing him, but her sort of stripping him down, he does take control of the situation and like basically shoves her onto the bed, and he's about to pounce on her before Graphia, I believe is how her name is pronounced, shows up. Yeah, I seized Rios by the shoulders, pushing her down on my bed. To think there was a fully naked girl lying beneath me was almost inconceivable. She had said that I could do it with her, though. And so he was about to go in, but then he gets stopped because Greyfield shows up. But the reason I'm saying I was a little surprised by this scene is because I was told by another person who sort of read the scans for the later books. Later on, we will see Issei's children, but I guess the way it was told to people, I'm not sure if that's how it's actually going to be when I read the actual book, is that basically, if it wasn't for the girls making the first move on Issei, they probably wouldn't have gotten, like, any kids, so to speak. But I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate in this situation. Yeah, beyond that, you just get the introduction to Graphia, and that's about it. Rias leaves him with blue balls, basically, because he does state on page 42 that obviously this left me with no choice but to do all those perverted things by myself throughout the night. The whole night through, I had to do something to bring my burning lust under control. What with how it all ended just moments before the main event. Unfortunately, that had now left me completely dejected. Yeah, so he basically just spent the rest of the night jerking it, Couldn't relate. It looks like so the next page will be on page 46. This is after Riser shows up for the first time. So after that encounter, the next sort of chapter section is they're back at the school. Issei enters the occult club, and that's when Riser makes his appearance for the first time in the book. Let me see here. Yeah, this is more of a power scaling one. However, it's referencing his heat. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. Flames erupted out of the insignia, filling the room with whirling heat. Damn, it was hot. My skin was practically laying off sparks. Okay. There's a lot of statements regarding his heat, and they're all kind of similar to that situation. Let's see here. Page 47. Do I not have it here? No, because there's no flames here. I did leave a note, which surprised me a little bit. I don't know if the actual anime talks about this or even references this. His last name is not spelled the way Phoenix is normally spelled. It's Phenex instead of Phoenix. I believe it is pronounced the same, to be fair. I believe it's still the House of Phoenix. But I just found it weird that they actually did make that distinction, because I don't think the anime ever talks about it, and the subtitles might, but not really touched on. But yeah, no, technically we are told later on that and I do have a note for it, but we are told later on that technically the reason his family name is not directly Phoenix is to differentiate itself from the mythical bird of legend, despite the fact that they have the same powers across the board. I believe that's even stated a little bit later on. Let me see here on page 51. Oh yeah, also he's over here talking about how he's gonna marry her. This is an arranged marriage because demons are dying off, and the families decide to marry off Rias to Riser to keep the bloodlines pure. So this one's kind of a little stupid. You find out Rias has two siblings, I believe, or I believe she has one sibling and one nephew, but she has a brother. Because usually family names, which is the problem in this book, and the family lineage is the issue going on, would be carried on by the male in old times, so to speak. Like the family name gets carried on. But in this book, even though she has an older brother who already has a kid, as there is a line given later on that they have grandkids, and later on again you do meet his child, because her brother ended up becoming one of the four great demon kings, technically taking over Lucifer's position in the demon king hierarchy, he technically loses the name Grimory. So technically the name will not live on after or with him, which is kind of fucking stupid, but whatever. It felt one of those scenes where it's like, this just feels like drama for the sake of drama. Let me see here. Yeah, 72 clans of noble demons, and most of them were died off. Pure blood demons were kind of like rare. So at this point, here we go. Yeah, so Riser does claim, and later on this is supported during the fight, that he does control fire and wind. I believe he does control one other element. I could be wrong about that. But so he controls fire and wind, and on the very next page, this one's actually really interesting. So in the last book, Rias had destructive powers that could basically erase a demon or an angel from existence, I believe it was. But she had a lot of raw power. In this book, Riser has fire. Like, that's his main shtick. But according to Issei, his flames were as strong as Riser's own power, and at such an intense temperature, we would have clearly been reduced to cinders if we let them so much as touch us. So, Riser's heat does, I think, another statement later on of how hot it is. I could be wrong about that. But it sounds like he doesn't really have the energy powers the other demons do. I don't remember if he ever shows that off in the anime. It just seems like he possesses fire and wind sort of elemental attacks, which is fine on its own, but it is kind of interesting if that's how demons sort of energies express themselves, because technically in this series it's kind of like DMC, where demons can basically just do whatever they want if they have enough desire for it. But yeah, so Rias rejects the proposal, or the marriage proposal that was assigned to her by her families, because technically they made a deal with her that until she graduated college she could live her own life, but once she graduated college then she'd have to go do what they want, basically. But I guess the marriage proposal is kind of the exception to the rule, just to guarantee that a pure blood gets born later on, I guess. Grafia, to be clear, also is the queen of her brother, and she's the most powerful queen in the underworld, as far as I believe it is a little later on. But yeah, so she's way stronger than them right now. She basically keeps them in line when they sort of show off their powers. But yeah, so they get forced into a ratings game. Like, for example, we have that image right there. I can show that one, because thankfully there are some images I can show. Some of them are a little more risque than others, but yeah. So that's what Riser looks like, and that's their encounter. Riser is immortal, so when they accept the ratings game, everyone kind of just already assumes that they're going to lose, just off the fact that he technically can't die. To be clear, and I'll talk about this a little later on, I think, but the way they specify is, and it seems really kind of strange, but you have to basically beat him in a submission. You can't kill him, technically, and you can't really fuck with his immortality if you're a demon. Angels would have no issue with him. Fallen angels probably wouldn't either, but specifically demons don't really have a way around his healing factor, as later on we get a pretty solid feat for it. But yeah. So he's also already won several games in the official rating game, because technically Rias was too young to participate in those games. This is her first raiding game, because technically she would have done practice and learned about it, but this is her first official one. And then we do get a scene on page 57 where Riser... So, I mentioned earlier Riser has a harem as sort of his pawns and his servants for the raiding game. He has, I believe there are 12? No, 16. So, he has, I think including himself, 16 pieces, but every single piece outside of himself is a woman who is a part of his harem. His sister, I don't know if I put a note here for that. I believe I did later on. His sister is a part of his 16 group, but technically, or not technically, he flat out states later on that she's just there for status and appearance, because I'm gonna probably directly quote it later on, but he says something along the lines of like, there are enough people who would be jealous of the sight of my sister being in my harem just because she's my sister, but I'm not really into my sister. So, yeah, so Issei ends up crying at the sight of his harem, and Riser's like genuinely concerned, where he actually stutters here. He's like, hey, Rias, your servant there looks like he's about to start crying. Like, he genuinely looks concerned, or at least he's genuinely, like, taken aback by it, which I found very amusing. And then Rias is just kind of, like, disappointed in him. It's his dream to have a harem. I'm sure your servants there have moved him to tears. Actually, interesting little thing that pops up in this book often that I would not have expected, but I think because this book was written in Japanese, first and foremost, this is kind of what happens. It specifically says placing her hand on her forehead in consternation. So, you can kind of tell based on context clues what this word means. However, this is a rather obscure word. Yeah, it just means feelings of anxiety or dismay, typically at something unexpected. Not the kind of word you would expect in a light novel for high schoolers. And remember that line, because the author does reference that at the end. But yeah, no. So... Oh, actually, okay, so this is actually a good example. I can actually read out his harem real quickly, because this is a good example of how he usually describes female characters. Okay. The knight and bishop who I looked over earlier were both women, and there was one wearing a Chinese dress, and two with animal ears, and two identical girls who could have been twins, and a petite Lolita girl, I believe that's his sister, and two curvaceous older women, and a classical Japanese beauty dressed in a kimono, and another wearing an elegant dress who would have been a European princess. No, I take it back. I believe the European princess is his sister. And a wild-looking old woman with a sword swung over her back, and another dressed like a dancer, and a suspicious-looking woman wearing a mask that covered half her face. So, no descriptions on half of these outfits. I do not remember specifically how his harem looked like, because I did not rewatch the anime for this book. I probably should have done that. However, that is how it's described. That is how most women are described. Later on, you do get lines that some girls have like big breasts and stuff, but beyond that, that is usually how the female characters are introduced or described as. So it was very interesting that he actually went full on in describing Rias when she was stripping earlier. I guess it's kind of like, you know, moment-to-moment situations. There was one other line. Yeah, so despite the girls being in a harem with him, or with Riser, they're all disgusted with Issei for wanting the same thing. Maybe it's just how much emotions he has. And then Riser starts making out with some of the girls, specifically to show off. He says, "Let's show them how intimate we are," or let's show him just how passionate we all are. And I don't know if this is referenced in the anime. I don't think the anime references this. The book flat out states that my crotch was involuntarily responding to the spectacle. So he was getting hard at the sight of them making out, which super fucking weird. But to be fair, he is a pervert, so it is in character with him. It's just kind of Because again, I don't think the anime directly ever even mentions that he's fucking getting a chub at the sight of fucking them making out. Which is kind of weird given the situation that, this is a guy who's after fucking Rias. I think that's what the anime went for, where the anime is kind of like, maybe he should be focusing more on the fact that this guy's going to take her away. But that's what happens there. So Issei gets upset when he calls him... So Issei is thinking that Riser's looking down on him, and that Riser's telling him he'll never be able to do this. Issei's kind of upset in his mind about it. Riser directly says he'll never be able to do this. So Issei boosts his gear to fight. However, one of the pawns decide. Oh, also Issei does call him a roast chicken, and Riser gets upset at that. It does reference that the sacred gear doubles his power every 10 seconds. And then Issei proceeds to lose against one of Riser's pawns, which is the petite girl who I guess is as petite as Konako. However, she completely stomps him out, even with him boosting his power, which means that she's stronger than the fallen angel from the first book, which, I mean... It makes sense, technically, but it's also kind of like a little silly that we go from Issei fighting off a fallen angel to not even being able to, like, take on another pawn. I know it's supposed to show that how far behind he is, but he's already boosted himself a couple of times before he fights her. So, like, I don't know. At least personally, I think there should have been a little more of a scuffle before he gets beaten, to show that he's, got a long way to go instead of just being blitzed by a random fucking pawn. But yeah. Riser here claims on page 61 that the sacred gear itself... let me see here. She's also the weakest of his servants, but sells far more experience than you. Sure, that might be a formidable, unrivaled sacred gear. Used properly, it could probably be me, the Demon King, or even God himself. But it's had countless users before you, and none of them have ever been able to take down the Demon King or vanquish God. Do you understand what that means? It means your sacred gear is incomplete, and its users are worthless weaklings who can't handle it properly. You're no different. What is it humans like to say at times like this, right? Casting pearls before swine. I will say I'm not quite sure. Rias wasted her pawn when she made you a demon. I don't know if Riser knows that he's worth all 8 pieces. So Riser, after watching Issei get stomped out, offers them 10 days to train for the raiding game because it'd be too easy for them. But that being said, we learn later on that a lot of the dragon sort of like boosted gear wielders were incredibly powerful, and they did do shit in life. They just all died in miserable ways due to having the sacred gear of the dragon, either dying to unnatural causes or being like hunted down and killed, I believe. We'll get to it eventually, but that's what I believe happens to a lot of the other people, because they're all kind of depressed when Issei first meets them, with the exception of like 2. But I don't think they're ever stated to be directly weak. And Riser is probably just talking shit to talk shit because they all died. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. I mentioned earlier that Ashia and Issei do end up like walking on each other while they're naked in the bathroom. And this one is another instance where we do have the girl being described by Issei, which again is a little out of the norm. Ashia's body was dripping with water. She must have been taking a shower. Her blonde hair was plastered to her soft, gorgeous white skin. It was incredible. Her proportions were perfect. A tight waistline and modest pert buttocks. I don't know why I keep saying buttocks or buttocks. It's weird. Like, it is a proper English word, but it's more of a formal one. Ashia's thighs were neither too slender nor too thick, the perfect size for my taste. Were I to ever glimpse those thighs through a slit in a skirt, I would be down on my knees in supplication. Then there were her breasts. Normally they were hard to make out, when she was clothed. They certainly weren't small, not bad size at all, in fact. And then Issei also gets super excited and gets excited downstairs, we'll say, at the sight of her. And she actually does look down at his crotch, and similar again to the whole innocence thing, he directly eeks, like eek, in response to her looking at his junk. So yeah, I guess very very sort of like cowardly nature to Issei when it comes to having girl like looking at girls being perverted. Yeah, and then Ashia is just kind of like surprised because she's never seen a man's like schlong before, and they awkward teen moment there, but that's about it. Although there is a fun moment here where his mom walks in on them naked, and when she sees them naked together, because I think they fall over at one point. Let me see here. Yeah, I believe they do fall over because he doesn't them basically gripping her in her arms. His mom walks in, sees them, and is just like, "Hey, honey, don't disturb them. We're about to become grandparents." Like they very much do not like. They don't get in Issei's way when it comes to getting close to the girls because they just want to have grandkids, which is always fun little interaction. Let's see here. Although I had a line here, but I'm not quite sure what it's referencing. Yeah. No, but the parents don't understand Issei at all when he says like nothing was happening. We do get sort of an interesting section where, and again, kind of like sort of building up Issei as a more likable protagonist, where Issei goes out of his way to protect her and keep her safe because he ultimately accepts responsibility for the fact that her life ended up the way it did mainly because of him. Although technically that's not true, but given how close he was to her, ultimately he was always going to take responsibility. Yeah, Ashia does get upset when she questions whether or not he would have showered with Rias, and when he doesn't respond, but he does fantasize about showering with her, and she obviously gets upset about that and is crying because she cries like almost every single scene she's in because of fucking Issei. But yeah, beyond that, we start the training arc at the end of that little section where they go up to the mountains. Issei. Oh, actually, there's another image I can show. Yeah, Issei ends up carrying a sort of big backpack with a bunch of stuff on it, but the anime does show it off a little more clearly, where it's like basically he's carrying like 2 tents worth of stuff on his back. But Konako and I believe Kiba are carrying way more stuff at that point. Yeah, but I think the only person, or the only 2 people or 3 people who aren't doing it are Ashia, Rias, and Akano. Everyone else is carrying stuff. But yeah, so that's when they make it to the top. They get dinner for the first time. Start picking sort of like, I believe they start picking up I've gathered some mountain vegetables. Yeah, so they make it to a wooden hut, is what it's described as in the book. However, I believe in the anime it's more equivalent to like a small mansion. And there we have an image of Kiba. I do not believe Kiba had an image in the first book, so I guess that makes sense why he gets one in this one. So yeah, the next couple of next couple of sections after that one is going to be. Oh, actually, wait. There is one other section, to be fair, where Issei tries to shower with them, or to shower with the girls, I believe. No, does that come a little later? No, okay, yeah, no. This final section is specifically just talking about how uh, Kiba does like jokingly tell him, "Hey, don't go peeking at the girls while they're changing." However, Issei does mention that as a result of him spending more time in the Occult Research Club, a lot of people have started shipping him and Kiba at the school, which I believe comes up a little later. Not in this book, but I believe that is covered in other sections. But yeah, so the next couple of sections is just Kiba and Akino, Konako just. Akino doesn't beat the shit out of Issei, to be fair, but Kiba and Konako do end up beating the shit out of him during training. Just because. So Issei's trying to learn swordsmanship with Kiba. He gets stomped out, obviously. Akino is teaching him magical powers. However, Uh, he sucks with magic, but this is where he learns the dress break technique because she tells him that the source of your abilities is in the visualization. In any event, it's important to materialize the image in your mind. It may be easier to form an image or an idea that is constantly in your thoughts. And well, Issei doesn't directly say it in this section, but he's basically asking her, would it be possible to destroy someone's outer appearance or outer material with the demonic energy? Also, Akino does demonstrate she has the ability to manipulate the elements again, as she is able to. Yeah. Now then, let's try turning that energy into an elemental force like fire, water, or lightning. You need to visualize what you're trying to accomplish. But for beginners like you, it'll probably be easiest to start with fire or water. So they can convert their demonic energy into other elements, which is why it's kind of weird how Riser's power seems to work. It seems to just be all flames instead of like any demonic power behind it. But yeah. Beyond that, just more training sessions. Issei gets sent flying by a single punch from Koniko. And also the way Issei starts training for the dress break is he just starts peeling vegetables. And he just keeps getting stomped out by the people he's training with, although that makes sense because Konako is also a rook, which makes her one of the stronger physical pieces to fight. And to be fair, he does internalize quite a bit of their training. It's just that he's still kind of trash, mainly because he's weak, although we do get an explanation later on for why he's so weak. Yeah, so then he does strength training with Rias, where he ends up carrying a boulder on his back with her staying on top of it, and then afterwards he starts doing push-ups, and the boulder gets put on top of him and she sits back down on top of him. So Issei just starts doing basic training. The boulder is never effectively described in the book, so a boulder is just a really big fucking rock. I would assume the anime has a more visual representation to go with, but I, again, did not watch it for the purposes of this review, so that's how that goes. Yeah. Although, Rias is able to pick up the rock with no problem. Yeah, then afterwards they sit down and have dinner with boar meat that apparently they hunted down, with fish that was gathered by the other people. Yeah. They're just here eating a meal. Nothing too crazy here. Although there is one section where Asya does get jealous at the fact that he keeps praising Akino's cooking, but she's just a little jealous because he's not praising her cooking. Yeah, let me see here. They start talking about battle strategies, how escaping's a battle strategy, stuff like that. Yeah, again, Issei just here declares that he needs to be strong to protect Asya. Oh, here's the hot spring section where he wants to go in with the girls. He was going to try and spy on them, but Kiba basically says, hey, I'm not going to help you spy on them. And then, Rias kind of jokingly is like, oh, you're planning to spy on us. and offers the idea that they all bathe together, uh, Akino's just kind of flirting with him the entire time. I believe I mentioned in the first book that she's overtly friendly to him, although I don't think there's ever a proper reason given for why Akino likes Issei, because I believe in the next book and in the next couple of sections in the anime too, that sort of love triangle starts up. It's not really a love triangle because at the end of the day, the girls are competing for Issei, but Issei's not really like he's not really forced to choose one or the other. At least since it is a harem route, and to be fair, it actually sticks to his guns and stays as a harem route. There are a lot of harem-esque animes and with multiple girls where the guy ends up choosing just one. I do know for a fact that at least in the future, he's married to at least 12, I believe 12 of the girls. All the main girls he gets married to, for sure. I don't know how many others beyond that, though. Yeah, but beyond that, he ultimately fails because Koneko says no. And then Kiba offers to wash his back for him. I will say, Issei doesn't like Kiba because Kiba's, like the nice pretty boy who got all the girls and stuff. But Kiba's just a total fucking bro in this book. Like, literally just the nicest fucking guy. Could not be nicer. And then Issei's just over here being a dick the entire time about it. Like, bro, come on. Stop being a dick. Yeah, Issei references, he does have to learn about the sort of like hierarchies of the governments, like Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel. He has to learn about the four great demon kings, like names. The female demon king Leviathan, Asmodeus, Beelzebub, Lucifer, all that stuff. However, he also does reference how much he hates fallen angels. I am curious to see how that's gonna come up in this book or in the book series versus the anime, considering that he ends up befriending a fallen angel later on. But yeah, so we do get a line on page 88 that exorcists do train their physical bodies to an otherworldly level. So that would just confirm that even the exorcists from the first book were all vastly stronger than anything a normal person would be able to pull off. Yeah, because Issei directly remembers the white-haired psycho exorcist from the first book. So it does specifically point out that otherworldly, at least for me, would just mean that any sort of physical strength feat that's been done by a human by the time when this book first came out would be fair game. Oh, the book is rated ages 18 and up. That's interesting. I'll talk about that later. Or actually, that might be for just America, whatever, or the West. I'll talk about that a little later. So, yeah, we do get some funny sections from Ashia here because she's still like super religious, and because she's a demon, she can't read the Bible anymore. And even though she knows how to make holy water and has crosses and stuff, she can't really interact with them. And the anime plays this off a little better because I believe in the anime she tries multiple times. But yeah, because she tries to read it, but every time she reads a single verse, it gives her a headache. So, she does cry at the idea that she can't read it anymore, to be fair. However, she tries to read a section and then immediately just gets a pain in her head. Although the fact that she claims she can read a passage at all more than likely means that every day by herself she's been forcing herself to read through a passage. This does resolve itself later on, to be fair. Like, for now, it's sort of played for comedic effect, but an in-character moment, this will be brutal since she really loves the Bible and she actually was genuinely religious and she can't read it at all anymore. It's played off for laughs. She is crying, but I mean, she sobs, but like it's not really like referenced. Again, in the anime, it's played for comedic effect. Although Issei does say, like, God, can't you just, like, cut her a fucking break, please? That is not a direct quote, by the way. There is no swearing in this book whatsoever. However, yeah, so Issei gets stomped out by everybody, and because of that, he does end up feeling incredibly worthless as a result, which I don't know what they were expecting was going to happen in this situation, because they were training him. But yeah, like throughout the book and in particular moments, he always ends up basically just crying at how worthless he is. Ashia is able to manipulate flames, water, and lightning on a small scale as a result of her training. So she has elemental manipulation after doing this. Very nice. Then he meets Rias in the moonlight. Or he meets Rias at night because she's looking over some battle plans to set up for the next event. Or not the next event, but the raiding game that's supposed to happen a little later on. It does reference her outfit. She was dressed in a red negligee. I have no clue what that is. However, I do know those glasses look really good on her though, and that negligee on hers accentuated her body. I don't know what the fuck that article of clothing specifically is. I know in the anime, I believe that's the scene in question. I believe it's the same scene in question because, yeah, it's at night when they meet. She's basically wearing a see-through pinkish outfit. Like, if I remember correctly, you can see her breasts and everything. She's practically fucking naked, but technically, I think it's like, it's a very thin fabric, I guess is what I would call it, because it's fucking see-through, 100% through. But yeah, so let me see here. We find out Rise is immortal. Here we go. Long ago, people worshipped the phoenix as a mythical life-controlling creature. Even today, legends remain all throughout the human world. Its tears are said to heal any wound, and drinking its blood supposedly can grant you immortality. To distinguish the two, humans gave the mythical creature the name of Phoenix, while labeling the demon family Phoenix. However, Rise's family possesses practically the same abilities as a legendary bird. In other words, immortality. That is who we must fight. And to be clear, the actual tears that can heal any wound, they do have that. They are able to cry those tears and make those tears as a result of that. Because the way Riser's family holds power in the demon world is effectively by selling their tears for ratings games, because you're allowed to use 2 Phoenix tears per game to restore 2 ally units, which will be referenced a little later on. However, yeah, so they can heal any wound, and he's effectively immortal. It does reference here that he won 8 of the 10 rating games he's done, and he only lost the 2 because of political reasons, as in he threw the matches to set up political deals or to get political benefits, or to just show respect to families that are a part of. Basically, political and familial ties are what he lost to. Although that was more so his choice. So effectively, he's undefeated. Here we do get a good character moment with Rias, where, as kind of mentioned earlier, she was supposed to be able to live freely until she graduated college of the human world. She basically, she's too famous for her own good. Because of her name, she would never be treated normally by anybody in the demon world. She would never be seen as a normal individual. She would always be seen as Rias Gremory, not just Rias. And she tried to escape that sort of life to at least meet some people who could care about her as her and not just her family name. So that's kind of why she hates the proposal why she hates the proposal so much. Yeah, the sentence kind of trailed off there a little bit. A little more tired than I usually am at this time of night. It's barely 2 a.m. It's a little strange. But yeah, so her family is what forced it, as I mentioned earlier, and Issei does reference that he likes her just as she is. kind of an everyman situation where the loser gets the more attractive girl because he's the only one who kind of like apparently will care and listen to her. Uh, Regarding Kiba, before someone asks about it, I believe there is a setup later on kind of explaining why that never happened. But yeah, so Issei does call her a genius. However, she doesn't like being called a genius. Not because of not so much for humility's sake, but because technically the term genius in her eyes, and I think in the history of the word, is a gift from God. Like your intelligence is a gift from God, and she's all like, my intelligence is not a gift from God. It is my own hard work. So yeah. So she doesn't like that, and basically he ends up crying in front of her because he's so worthless, and she ends up comforting him for like I think it's the first time in this book, but it won't be the last. So here Issei does use his boosted gear for the first time since his training. Let's see here. Yeah, so he boosts himself for 2 minutes, compounding, doubling of my abilities, power surge for my sacred gear. Increasing my power was way all good, but there were a few things I had to be careful while using the boosted gear. While I initially assumed there was no time limit to how far my ability, or there was no limit to how far my ability could have been increased, that wasn't the case. One time I tried activating to see how far I'd go, but I ended up fainting only after a few minutes. The reason was simple enough: my body couldn't handle all that extra power. So technically, he can't boost himself indefinitely at the current moment. He will get buffs to fix that problem. Yeah, too much power puts a heavy strain on the body. That was why I fainted. I simply couldn't withstand that much extra energy. Yep. Even at the boosted gear itself had virtually limited power, its user, didn't. That was the ultimate weakness of the sacred gear, or rather that was my weakness. It wasn't the sacred gear's fault. So, after 12 power-ups, so he stops at the 12 power-ups. Once I reach a certain, he activates the explosion. The sound acted as a stopper. It meant that my sacred gear understood that I had powered up enough. Once I reached a certain level, I could maintain that state and fight for a while. The length of time essentially depended on how I spent that extra energy. The more I moved or attacked, the shorter I had. My stamina level also played a role. Being tired meant less time too. That was why the best way to use a boosted gear was to avoid taking damage. Yeah, so the more actions he takes and the more damage he takes while he's using the sacred gear, the faster the power drains. That was a weakness that was included in this book. I do not recall that being in the first book. So I was talking to Kyle about this on one of the live streams, but that's one of the things where it felt like the editor stepped in and was like, hey, the ability to double your power over and over and over again is fucking really strong. You need to tone that down. And so that's what the author most likely compromised with to keep his character in check for the time being. With the 12 boosts of the sacred gear, so keep in mind, technically, this is technically times 2, but I think it's more accurate. I don't know. It says compounded doubling. I think the last time I had an issue about this. I don't know if the story ever actually claims if it's just times 2 times 2 times 2, or if doubling it means, let's say Issei starts at 5, now he's at 10, then he goes to 20, then he goes to 20 plus 20, etc. Which is still times 2, but technically there's a little bit of a difference in that if you care for scaling purposes, because multiplication versus addition is always going to be a little different. Because then there's also the idea of it being like squared, and if it's like squared, like, because again, like, let's say 4 squared is 4 times 4 equals 16. 2 squared is 2 times 2 equals 4. Like, again, the way the math would technically work here would be rather important to figure out, but I don't think they ever actually explain it. Issei is able to react to Kiba, or with his attacks. To be clear, Kiba was blitzing him earlier on when he didn't have himself boosted. So he is able to fight Kiba head on and actually keep up with him for a short amount of time. However, yeah, because he runs out of time after using an energy blast to hit Kiba. So Issei references in the book that he can only create a very small orb, and that's all he can do. that doesn't change with the boost, but what the boost does is after he creates the small, tiny marble-like orb, the boost goes to the orb and like massively increases its size and destructive potential to the point where he levels a mountain. Not a mountain range, to be fair, but he levels just one mountain in what appears to be a range. Yeah. The mountain was gone. Yeah, he basically hits a mountain. Kiba was trying his hardest to beat Issei, although because Issei had boosted himself, even when Kiba strengthened the blade with his own power, it didn't really matter because it basically broke on impact when it hit Issei. So, I believe Rias does claim, or somebody claims on page 102. Hang on, where's the line? Yeah, so according to Rias, the destroyed mountain is on level of a high class demon. Something like that would have defeated almost any opponent. This level of power gets completely trounced later on in the series. But I feel like this line in particular ends up downplaying the verse in terms of scaling later on because Issei ends up doubling his powers vastly beyond just 12 times as the series goes on. And he would always be getting stronger. So, that's about the last one, or the last important moment before the showdown starts. I don't remember if in the anime they wear some sort of attire to represent themselves as a team. I believe in the anime they do have some sort of like headbands. I could be wrong about that. It might be a different section I'm thinking about. But they do not have any extra outfits here. They just have any clothes that are comfortable for them. The demons do end up creating a dimension to fight their battles. What does it say here? There we go. The match will take place in a neutral alternate space, a dimension created and set aside solely for this battle. Feel free to fight to your full potential. We will discard the battlefield when we are finished, so don't worry about causing any damage. Yeah. That makes sense, I thought. An artificial battlefield. I hadn't known that demons were able to create spaces like this. Yeah, so demons are just able to create entirely separate dimensions, or at least entirely separate replicas of the battlefield to fight in. I don't know if it's a separate... I believe it is a separate dimension, since they are... well, I mean, it is a separate dimension, but I don't know if it's ever stated that they themselves created it. They do say it's a dimension created and set aside solely for the battle, but we don't have a size for it, and there is no space on the outside. It's just a pure white void. So, best case scenario would be that for scaling purposes, depending on the size of the other battlefields, we can maybe get some scaling off of that. But for this particular scene, it would probably just be like maybe like a city block, multi-city block level creation feat, technically. Granted, if I can find a statement later on claiming that the realms would just be infinite in size, that changes things, but there's nothing in them besides the actual battlefield. I do believe time is in there, to be fair, so I'm not going to make that claim. We do get a line that demons are currently the least powerful faction of the three still alive, which is why they were trying to get Rias to marry Riser, because that would still help. That would help create more pieces for them. Let's see here. The plan is to make Issei promote in Riser's camp, because the way raiding games work is like a chessboard, and they even make a map that is drawn up with chess pieces, or not just pieces, but it's they get a map of the school and they mark it up like a chessboard to determine where the enemy's base is and stuff, so they could promote Issei. Let's see here. Yeah, so after planning it out, they do start their raiding game. They do booby trap the area around them, but that's about it. With Riser having 8 pawns, they can have 8 queens total. Issei can only turn the 1 queen. They divide the battlefield like, let's see here, like pieces. Akino is able to create illusions that will work only on Riser's forces. Again, demonic power in this verse basically can do whatever you imagine it. We do get a scene where Issei gets a lap pillow from Rias as a way to motivate him to fight harder because he's still feeling a little worthless. Then we do get a reveal that Issei does not have access to his full power normally. Ignoring the boost from the sacred gear, Rias reveals that Issei wasn't strong enough to maintain his power of all 8 pawn pieces. So technically, unless I'm mistaken, he only has 2 pawn pieces as after game 1 awakened. But that seal gets released and he becomes strong enough to use more power. He gets a lot stronger. Let's see here. I believe there's a line here I'm looking for. Yeah, Issei going over his limits again. There was limits to how many moves I could make while powered up, and I wasn't particularly skilled using my demonic powers, so I couldn't afford to waste them. If I was going to attack it, it would be safer to do so, and not to mention more effective after I promoted myself to a queen. Yeah, because by promoting himself to a queen, he makes his physical body stronger and his magical powers grow, so he would have more access to a wider range of abilities and a bigger sort of pool to withstand the powers of the Red Dragon Emperor. Let's see here. Alright, so after that we start the battle. To be clear, the entire fight between Riser and Rias' forces only lasts... I mean, technically it lasts 65 pages, which is the overwhelming majority of the book size. Let me see here, there we go. To be fair, it does not feel like it though. The fights go by incredibly quickly. So, Konako and Issei go to the gym to fight off some of Riser's forces. This is where Issei fights the Chainsaw Girls I showed earlier on, and basically, in order to fight them, he has to boost up a couple of times in order to... Actually, yes, because he hasn't... Yeah, he's still boosting. He can fight a move while boosting, but it does affect the boost and his own body substantially. I believe substantially. I could be wrong. But he really can't fight while boosting, but he technically can. It's just more effective not to. So he fights the pawns. He is able to boost substantially enough to where he can block their attacks and keep up with them. And after powering up only 3 times, so times 2, times 2, times 2, we'll assume, he's able to blitz the twins who were stronger than him at the start. Yeah, the pawns had a little time to react, and then he directly actually beats the shit out of them. I was actually a little surprised on that one, because he does go out of his way to actually attack them. Like, not even a little bit. Like, he backhands one of them, and I think he fucking decks one, like, in an uppercut. Yes. However, Issei reveals the dress break technique where he just blows off all... basically, if Issei touches you, he can transfer energy into your body, and by doing that, he can effectively strip you of all your protection, technically. Because later on, the Queen references the idea that Issei could remove Riser's flames with the dress break technique, but Riser is just like, nah, he won't do it because I'm a man, and he only used the technique on women, which Issei confirms is correct. So actually a very strong move, but he just used it to strip women. not not very effective for combat, unfortunately. The girls do sort of scream out in shock, and he gets judged incredibly harshly by everybody, including Konako, over the dress break technique. Which I'm just gonna be real here for a minute. This is a fight to win. If you can't fight while naked, that's on you. That is absolutely on you. Because there's a similar motif in Fist of the North Star with Rei. Because in Rei Gaiden and in the main manga, Rei strips girls on occasion who claim to be warriors, and when they cover up their chest, he's basically like, if you're a warrior, why are you covering up your chest? You know, if you're fighting, you don't exactly have time, or you shouldn't be wasting time covering your chest. So, a similar motif I got here, and then Akino immediately just one-shots the gym, leveling into the ground, completely, like, destroying the gym. Yeah, so dress break is explained here. I had poured all my powers in this ultimate move. I didn't have much of my demonic power, so even though I spent nearly a waking moment thinking about loot stuff like this technique still took everything I had. Yeah, he snaps his fingers in order to do it. That was why I spent all that time peeling vegetables and fruit, using nothing more than demonic powers. I peeled them until I thought my mind was starting to slip. For a technique to work, I first need to come into physical contact with my target. At that moment, I then had to pour my demonic powers into them. The end result spoke for itself. So theoretically, Issei's energy could also probably do more damage. He just chooses not to use it for more effective ways. So yeah, Akino takes out the gym, and then afterwards, she knocks out all three of the pawns at once. Although I will say, it is kind of a little annoying that Konako also is like, won't even like high five him after seeing the technique in action. Like, I understand it's still like a really like dirty technique, but like, I mean, come on, you guys are fighting the fucking win. Let's put some fucking pep in that step a little bit. And then Konako gets like immediately fucking trounced, because the Explosion Queen of Riser's forces ends up sniping Konako from across the bat, from like in the air. She just blows her the fuck up. Yeah. And then she just disappears, because technically when you start dying, or when you get close enough to death, you get pulled out of the raiding game automatically. And then you get taken to an area to heal yourself. Yeah, so Konako just got fucking sniped. We do get a scene of Akino challenging the queen, and then she actually does get mad at Issei for trying to stay and help her. But basically, like, one glare from her was enough for him to be like, all right, bet. I'm off. Yeah, so then we get to chapter 5, because technically chapters are referred to as life. So that's the first start of the battle. Next time around, he meets Kiba, after Kiba's already taken out like 3 or 4 pawns on his own, because again, he would still be way faster and stronger than the pawns. Issei does have the sacred gear, but he's already gone through a bit of the fight. So he does reveal that he's incredibly nervous. But he's like, Kiba, I know you're not nervous because you've already, fought and shit. So, I know it's just me. And then Kiba's like, nah, bro, I'm shaking, bro. We're all nervous here. Although, to Issei's credit, when Issei is on the battlefield, he's basically like, yeah, I hate Kiba in any other situation, but on the battlefield, he's like the best fucking friend I can have right now, bro. Let's fucking go. I'm like, bro, you fucking bastard. Yeah, and then we get some speed feats here, where, here we go, where is it? Sparks flew wildly as their blades made contact, perhaps because they were both knights, their movements were unbelievably fast. The fight had only just started, but their swords moved swifter than my eyes could perceive. Kiba and Carlamine both kept appearing and disappearing in different spots across the field. So Issei and could not actually keep up with her fight technically. And yeah, here we have the European princess who is Riser's sister. I do know that later on she ends up joining Issei. So let's see here. Next it's going to be on page 141. Oh, here we go. Master Riser has a certain take on it. There's a social meaning to having your sister in your harem. I mean, it's incestuous, right? There are a lot of people out there who dig that kind of thing. I'm not into sisters, though, so it's more for show than anything else. But yeah, no. So we do get a scene of we do get a line of Issei doing instinctive reaction. The masked woman lunged forward, her fist brushing past my cheek as she threw a punch. Luckily, I shifted to the side by pure reflex. And so to be clear, the Rook would be stronger and faster than Issei at the current moment because I don't think he hasn't really boosted yet. He started the boost, but the burst hasn't happened yet. So yeah, so he's basically holding on, dodging and blocking the attacks as he's trying to boost up his power. Yeah, he's still boosting. He basically says 5 boosts won't be enough to take on a Rook. He has to keep going since Rooks are second only to Queens in value. So the fact that Issei through reflex alone is able to dodge an attack like that is actually pretty good, but obviously she's able to react to, keep up with him. So let's see right here on page 143, we have Kiba revealing the fact that his sacred gear is not the sword from the first book. His sacred gear is technically the ability to create multiple sacred gears. It's a sword bird, the ability to forge all manner of demonic blades. That's the true name of my sacred gear. That's what it's capable of. She fights with a flame sword, but he's able to, after his shadow sword breaks, because he starts off with a sword made of shadow, he creates a sword made of ice that instantly freezes her sword on contact. Yeah. The moment her flame sword met Kiba's frigid one, it was engulfed in ice with an echoing sound. The enemy's knight's weapon shattered. Sorry about that. Even though it's still fucking not even 3 a.m. Yeah, my mom's fucking calling me. So I'll have to be a little more quiet. Yeah, so basically he's able to use, and then afterwards he's able to use another sword that sucks in flames after she uses the flames of the Phoenix. So he's able to create swords basically on the fly to counter situations, making him have a pretty substantial and very powerful sacred gear since they were all distinct demonic swords. She does taunt him with the idea of fighting a holy sword user at one point, and Rooks are able to castle in the raiding game where a king can swap places with a Rook at any time, which is not used in this raiding game, but I do wonder if that's going to come up in another raiding game later on, because I don't remember when the next raiding game is. On page 147 here, Issei fires a blast that misses his target because he's fighting the Rook. He finally charges up and gets ready to fight. He launches an energy blast outwards, but unfortunately it misses the target, and he does blow up. The tennis courts along with the surrounding parts of the athletic track have been completely obliterated. Even if the replica of the single attack could completely destroy a portion of the school grounds, nothing remained of the tennis courts but a huge crater. Even though I tried to restrain the power of my attack, it's still been extremely devastating. So Issei's consistently demonstrating city block level attacks here. And keep in mind that energy blast would scale to all of his boosted attacks. Hang Okay, here we go. So Issei uses another address break on the Rook, where at that moment Isabella's clothes blew clean off, revealing her dewy naked body. Her breasts were huge. Her well-toned body was so fit and tight. I made sure to burn the image into my memory. And because her clothes fly off, she immediately covers herself, and Issei just blows her up with another attack. And Issei claims that he had already used up a lot of his physical stamina and demonic power, using the dragon shot multiple times. I was content being at a level of using that move 2 more times, but I had a feeling that a third use of it was bound to leave me so weak that I'd likely fail on the spot. So he ends up basically saying, like, I got one more in me. And then afterwards, Kiba gets bloodlusted when he finds out that the girl he's fighting, the other knight, fought a holy swordsman. Issei gets boosted, but when more pawns and I believe a rook and a bishop show up, however, what's her name? Ravel, because I don't think she's. Yeah, she is, I believe. Yeah, Ravel directly instructs her like fellow sort of pieces on how to fight Issei to keep him in check, and it actually does work. To be fair, he ends up getting swarmed and he can't really boost effectively as he gets stomped out by 2 like animal sort of like. I guess I'm not quite sure what the term is. They're girls, but they have like cat ears basically. I'm sure there's a term for it somewhere. However, Issei, in his desperation, is able to unlock a new power, which would be the boosted gear Dragon Booster Second Liberation. I believe it has an actual name. It's more so boosted gear gift transfer. Basically, Issei can double all of his power and then transfer that power into somebody else in order to increase their abilities exponentially. So earlier on, Kiba is able to make swords from the ground, but not a lot of them. And after Issei boosts him, it states that they had all been skewered by countless blades that had suddenly erupted from the earth. Their bodies no disappeared. Blades of every shape imaginable jutted forward from the ground, reaching up to the sky. Everywhere I looked, there were countless more. So Issei was able to boost Kiba's ability so much that when Kiba activated his sacred gear on full display, it created a countless number of swords that just shot out of the ground, stabbing and killing all the other or killing the other pawns and pieces. I did mention that Kiba does get bloodlusted, but what I forgot to mention is that Kiba's bloodlust ends up shaking the earth as a result of his just sheer anger and demonic power responding to that. And then you find out that Akino actually loses her fight against Kiba because Kiba immediately gets sniped by Riser's Queen, because you find out, as I mentioned earlier, that they have Phoenix Tears that can heal back any injury. So technically, I don't think we see the fight in the anime either, but the way it's implied is that Akino more than likely won the first part of the fight, but she just took a Phoenix Tear and was able to beat her because she was able to get a full restore. I believe the Phoenix Tears do work on stamina as well. Yeah, because Issei is basically out of stamina by this point, so he can't really fight anymore. I believe he collapses. Yeah, he already collapsed here on page 160. And Ravel doesn't fight him, but she does acknowledge that his power to transfer and boost other people is going to be a major threat down the line, which, yeah, that makes sense. Let's see here. Yeah, Phoenix Tears that can heal any wound. Although when Issei claims, or Issei doesn't claim that they're cheating, but she's basically like, listen, don't even try to claim that we're cheating with the Phoenix Tears because you guys have the Twilight Healing from Ashia, which is just as good. Except Ashia's healing does fuck all in this fucking battle because every fucking piece just gets fucking insta sniped. It's like fucking ridiculous. Issei does end up getting healed by her a little later on. Yeah, so when Issei goes to fight or to help Rias, Ravel does try and stop him, but he's just like, if you get close to me, I'm gonna strip you naked, and she just backs off immediately. Yeah, so Issei heads up there, or Issei heads to the building to fight to help Rias, because Rias ends up challenging Riser near the end of the fight. I think this is after, this is before or after Kiba gets sniped. He becomes a queen, but he still collapses because he's out of energy. But he still motivates himself to keep fighting and moving forward. Ashia heals him, and then Rias proceeds to blow up half of Riser's head, and just the flames just heal it back. Yeah. So, Riser's queen, Master Riser, shall I take care of the palm boy and Lady Rias' dear little bishop? You should know he possesses a rather awkward ability. He can strip his opponent's clothes right off. And then Riser says, are you worried he might extinguish the flames that protect my body? I wonder. So, it's possible that he might just be able to, if Issei was actually smart and wasn't such a pervert, he could potentially just remove anything on a person's body with the dress break, technically. But the regeneration of the Phoenix just kind of dominates at this point. Ashia can't restore stamina, so Issei basically collapses. Yeah, Ashia's healing did nothing for exhaustion. I was going to have to do something about my lack of stamina. Technically, I don't think that's how that works in real life. If your body gets fully restored to peak condition, I don't think you'd be tired anymore. This happens a lot in fictional stories where it's like, oh yeah, bro, you can get fully healed, but you're out of energy. The fuck? Unless that healing drains me of my stamina, that should not be how this works. But yeah, so Issei does boost himself and tries to fight, but I think the second he moves forward, he basically collapses and coughs up blood. Yeah. Yeah, and so this is okay. Yeah, so this is where Issei is basically just dying at this point. He's passed out, but he's still in there. He's still able to fight to some extent. And it says that Riser had basically withstood countless injuries. She had attacked Riser countless times, inflicted more injuries on him than would be counted, but no matter what she did, he merely healed afterwards with a flash of fire, as if nothing had ever happened. So yeah, just being purely immortal gave him just a pure advantage. Although, this is, so right here we have an interesting moment in the book, because the entire book is from Issei's point of view. Then we get a line that says checkmate, and we get Rias's point of view for about 2 pages. It literally says Rias Gemery was out of options. In other words, it was checkmate. None of us had any strength left to fight. Even so, he had still come for me. He alone had risen, continued fighting at my side. Issei, he was the only one who kept pushing on, who would have challenged Riser and faced certain defeat. All that effort had been for nothing, though. Riser's last strike had finished him. Watching Issei fall numbly backwards, I found myself running towards him, taking him in my arms. He was covered in blood and sweat. To be honest, he looked terrible. Yet I loved him still. However, even though Issei is technically unconscious at this point, he's still able to get up and keep fighting. Yeah, because right here... But I felt silent at what I saw. Of course, Issei has already lost conscious. His eyes were vacant and his mouth hung slack, but somehow he kept pushing himself forward step by crawling step. His clenched fist wouldn't stop shaking. Yeah, so Issei had already passed out and given, and like he's donezo, but his body's still able to get up and keep fighting regardless. Uh, he does end up collapsing finally when when like she hugs him and tells him like, "Hey, listen, you've done enough. Like it's okay, it's over." And so then the game ends with her being defeated and her getting ready to get married off to Riser. And while he's passed out from exhaustion, he does end up talking to the Red Dragon Emperor, the Welsh Dragon. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'll have to ask someone later on. And the dragon does talk to him and gives him a bit of a pep talk about how he'll get stronger and how he'll meet the White One someday. However, he does also state that I can give you power, but it will come at a cost, which is kind of weird because usually you don't set up a like Chekhov's gun like that this late in the book because that's what's left. So, to be clear, the entire battle at the entire battle at the stadium is 170 pages. The final portion of the story with Issei going to fight Riser right now and try and get Rias back is only like 20 pages. The entire fight's like only like 10, I think like 2 pages for the final fight, which makes sense because it only has 10 seconds to fight. But yeah, so basically you find out that Rias had been, or that Issei had been asleep for several days on end, and Grafia is there talking to him about how he had impressed the Demon King Lucifer enough to sort of like get a favor from him, if that makes sense. Where he was satisfied enough to allow her or to allow him to fight for her once again. We do have another image there, although this one is a little more lewd than the other ones were. I think it's fine to show though because there's no nudity on there. Yeah, Ashia says, you didn't wake up for 2 days. He tells her, I'm gonna go fight for Rias, and she's like, all right, I'll go with you, I hope you. And he's like, no, you stay here. I need you here. And he says he'll bring her back and that he won't make her cry anymore. Ashia says it won't be all right, and then she starts crying again. How she'll get hurt, or how Issei will get hurt, etc., etc. You know that situation. And Issei's just like, yeah, I made her cry all the time. I should really not do that. Also, Issei does learn on page 175 that the dragons are not affiliated with heaven, fallen angels, or demons, which does, again, this is a lot of information that comes into play immediately after learning about it. Because after this, Issei makes a deal with the dragon to gain more power. He arrives at the location of the wedding, or I guess technically the ball before the wedding, so to speak. And he invades the venue and challenges Riser to a fight to take Rias back. Yeah, because yeah, when Issei storms the actual reception, the rest of the chess pieces, like his teammates, do end up stepping in to help him out a little bit. There is a line here. I don't know where I missed it. Yeah, okay, here we go. He yells out in front of the entire area that Rias Gramarie's virginity belongs to me. And then basically the Demon King is like, all right, so let's have them fight for entertainment so we can see the dragon and the phoenix go at it. It'd be super fucking cool. And Issei, you can have whatever you want if you win. And so Issei's like, alright, I'll have Rias if I can beat the Riser in a fight. So they do head to an arena. And Riser does point out how he knows everything about Issei's abilities. And then Issei tells Rias that he'll end the fight in 10 seconds. Which is not so much a... I mean, he does, but it's not bragging. His new power-up only lasts 10 seconds, because he gets the Breaker Armor, I believe is what it's called. Yeah. So he gets promotion to become a queen, so he gets amped by the Queen State, and then, after sacrificing his arm to the Red Dragon Emperor, he unlocks the Overbooster ability, which just gives him it gives him a suit of armor, but it does something else. I'm trying to find the exact line it says. Yeah, use it well, but only for 10 seconds. Your body won't endure any more than that. Indeed, with 10 seconds. Yep, with 10 seconds, we'll pulverize him. With a brilliant burst of red light, I lunge forward. Let me see here. Not only that, but also propulsion device and the rocket booster built in the back of the suit. You use the power of the Red Dragon Emperor to shield yourself. He apparently looks like a dragon. This is the power of the Red Dragon Emperor, Balance Breaker, Boosted Gear, Scale Mail. If you want to stop me, ask Lord Demon King. It sounds like this is a famous, dreaded, and forbidden technique. The Scale Mail ability released all of the Sacred Gear's destructive potential in a 10-second burst. Once it was activated, it was practically invincible. Unfortunately, it also carried a considerable risk. Each time the ability was used, it rendered my Sacred Gear unusable for 3 whole days. The Red Dragon had explained that to me. Basically, this was an all-or-nothing maneuver, and then you get a countdown with Roman numerals starting. Granting access to the full power potential of your weapon instantly for only 3 days rest afterwards is not that big a deal, unless you're like constantly in war. But if you're constantly in war, you probably also have other ways to mitigate the situation. Yeah, so basically he creates a blast of energy that fills up half the hull that he was originally in, or that would have filled it up, which means that it's a massive energy, because I believe the hull in the anime is has like massive roof and a massive ceiling. Yeah, so Riser actually, instead of withstanding the attack, decides to dodge it, meaning that it's an attack strong enough that even Riser would be concerned about it. And he accelerates with his armor, which has like a jetpack on it. But it says that I couldn't so much as move my body due to immense G-forces, but I was closing the distance to my target at an instant rate. And then he just flies past Riser and slams into the wall. Yeah, so Riser gets upset and decides to... Yeah, so we're at 8 seconds now. He basically engulfs himself in pure flame that says that if those flames came into contact with the guests, they likely would have been reduced to ash, so they all had to put up barriers to protect themselves. And then Issei does point out that, or the Red Dragon Emperor does state that the flames of the Immortal Phoenix can damage you to my Dragon Mail. You don't want to take too many hits from him. So Issei goes forward and he manages to strike him head on, and they do end up clashing in a straightforward fight, punch to punch. Issei does point out that he's terrified the entire time, and that even though he's scared shitless, he's still just fighting at his peak value. However, Issei is able to use a cross that is boosted by his Sacred Gear in order to damage Riser and sort of fuck with his healing factor. Yeah, I boosted the power of this cross with my Sacred Gear. When I hit you, an enhanced holy attack like that ought to be super effective no matter how high class you are. If I'm right, not even the Immortal Phoenix can recover from that kind of damage. And this is where you find out that Issei had traded his arm to the dragon. Because the dragons aren't affected by demons, heaven, or earth, or anything, at least in terms of like holiness and unholiness. Having access to the dragon arm lets Issei use holy weapons. So basically, Issei loses the armor afterwards because he's too weak to keep fighting with it, but he does have enough power left to, because of the Red Dragon Emperor, he has enough power left to boost holy water in his dragon arm, splash it on Riser, get the cross again, and he's able to pummel him to the ground. But there is one last line I did want to make clear or talk about very briefly. Here we go. Nonetheless, the power of the holy water will consume not only his physical strength, but his willpower as well. Even for a creature that regenerates from its own ashes, he will need time to recover from this blow to his spirit. So holy damage in the series does also damage you on a mental level as well. And yeah, afterwards, Issei just wins by slamming him with the holy cross. Afterwards, he gets Rias on that griffin basically, and they fly off. Rias kisses Issei, and then she moves into the house with Issei and Ashia, and Rias and Ashia start their sort of little marriage conflict. Although, so there was one thing I wanted to mention a little bit of at the end here. The author, in the author afterward notes, directly states it's going to be a volume that middle school students and high school students alike will be embarrassed to purchase in stores. He does thank his editor for putting him on the path of pornographic content, and Ashia does claim that her only chance is going to be polygamy to get with Issei, but it's a violation against the Lord's teachings, so she's a little confused. But the actual age rating for the book is 18 and up, but the author notes claim that middle schoolers and high schoolers might be able to purchase the book, so I can't help but wonder if in Japan this book was more legal for middle schoolers and the like. Middle schoolers and high schoolers, because it does have pornographic content in there. There's no way anyone in like the United States or the Western world will be able to buy one. But unfortunately, I had to be quiet for that, and I had to speed it up a little bit. So overall, the characters are better. Rias is about the same. Issei got a lot better. Akino spends like no real time in the book, so she's still just like, nice. Kiba and Koneko get more development in this book. There's not a lot of reason to like Koneko, because even when Issei's not being a total fucking twat, Koneko's still not being very, she's not being chill with him at all, which is kind of fucking stupid. And Kiba's just a chill guy across the board. Rice is an alright antagonist. Got a ringing in my ear for some reason. And, there's not really too much to talk about. They do reference the other bishop that Rias is supposed to have, that she doesn't, because later on you end up finding out that she has a bishop, but she's, I believe she's too weak to use it. Overall, book 2 is a substantial improvement over book 1. And next up will be book 3, Excalibur of the Midnight Yard. Hang on, gotta move to B9S over here very quickly. Yeah. So this will be the next book in the series. This one does introduce the Zenobia, a character who ends up joining the sort of group after the events of this book. Let me see if I can show off a couple pages. So the reason these books are sealed like this is because they are ultimately pornographic in nature, and you can't have a book like this in a bookstore where kids can show up and look at the pictures. Okay, yeah, so I cannot show you the images. But technically I can. So I can show you the first image, which is fine on its own, Zenobia. I can't show you the second image, but I can show you the third one. So, I'm a little curious to see what changes this will have in reference to the hell. Huh. That's kind of crazy, actually. I think there's only one illustration in the whole book. Huh. Interesting. I wonder if that's just on the. No, there should be more than one, but we'll find out later on. But so, yeah, so that's about it for this book. Unfortunately, I was a little rushed here at the end because I guess it's a little too late at night. And yeah, overall great book. I enjoyed it. Not too much for the power scaling outside of a couple of statements. That's about it. Not too much lore on abilities either. I'm wondering if that'll be expanded on the next book, or if not, we're just gonna kind of be stuck moving forward with that. Demons are stronger at night. Issei does train at night just as hard as he trains during the day, but that's about it. So, with that said, thank you guys for your time as always. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys on next stream or video. Take care, everybody.